Grove TV3 honors our nation's veterans in this special program featuring the stories of 4 brave men who served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Iraq. Their tales of combat remind us freedom is never free. They made sacrifices that weren't always appreciated, putting their lives on the line and afterwards spending a lifetime trying to recover from their experiences. Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Arthi Nehru. You're about to hear the stories that often go untold, simply because they're too hard to share. We sat down with veterans who served in 4 different wars. As they gradually open up, they paint the picture of life at war and the unique challenges they each faced. We begin with the World War II Navy medic whose 2.5-year service lives with him even today.
I couldn't believe that anyone would ever attack us. I mean, we were so powerful.
The attack at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 was hard for Jack Gutman to forget. 2 years later, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy.
The war was progressing. I felt I had to do something for my country.
At 17, Gutman was trained as a medic and sent to the Royal Victoria Hospital in England.
We all knew it was going to be for something. It was all hush-hush. Of course, we now know it was for the Normandy invasion. This outfit was huge. I mean, just thousands of us. Women nurses, doctors. It was strange because I couldn't stand the sight of blood. I mean, I would get wheezy when I saw it. But I soon got over that.
Harder to get over the many plane bombings he witnessed.
The bombs. They would go along, you'd hear blah, 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 and then finally, when it stopped, it would go at an angle. And all of a sudden be a huge explosion. Many times a house, people.
Later, Gutman was chosen to help with the Normandy invasion. He says this is where it got personal.
When you're a medic, you're taking care of a guy who got shot and he's screaming, "Mama, Mama," you know, and then he's saying to the doc, "Doc, am I going to die? Am I going to die?" It becomes very personal.
To this day, Gutman can't forget his experience with one particular patient.
I felt I had to lie to him that he's going to make it, he's going to be okay and be with his family. And that was something I carried with me a lot. If a man dies on your watch, and he did die, you have to pack every cavity in his body with cotton. I mean, his ears, his nose, everything, every cavity. I had to do this 4 times in the time in the war. Very traumatic.
Another traumatic moment came for Gutman when he was on a ship called the Buoy.
I had just finished taking care of a bunch of people in Okinawa. All of a sudden, a thing, boom, 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 and I think that's where I lost my hearing on it because it didn't have anything, I didn't expect anything. All I had was this ringing in my ears and my head. We were attacked by the Japanese kamikaze planes. All of a sudden, this guy veers up and goes right into the bridge of the battleship New Mexico. And I see this huge explosion. And I didn't know how many people were killed, but found out later the captain, I guess 80 people were killed then. I had never seen something like that in my life.
After Okinawa, Gutman helped take the wounded back to Pearl Harbor. As they got ready to invade Japan, he learned that President Truman had approved dropping bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and that the Japanese had surrendered.
I'm sorry there were so many people that had to die in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, but all I know is that Jack Gutman would not have been here had he not okayed that.
Gutman made it back home for his 20th birthday and for Christmas.
Every time I hear, "I'll be home for Christmas," I cry because it was so touching for me to finally get there and be alive.
Gutman worked as a comedian and used humor to try to escape his nightmares and flashbacks of World War II. But what he experienced during his 2.5-year service stayed with him for more than 60 years.
You know what it feels to see a guy with his guts blown out, the guy shot in here and his face blown out here like that.
Despite the post-traumatic stress disorder,
I say in all sincerity, if I had to do it again, I certainly would. I'm proud that I was there to serve my country.
our next veteran served in 3 wars during his service of nearly 3 decades. To this day, his fingers remember the numbness he felt from the bitter cold weather in Korea.
I got with my pals, we decided we would go ahead and join the service, so we chose the Marine Corps. We went and talked to the recruiters in Wilkes-Barre and liked what we saw and decided to join and go to serve our country.
Robert Buck Rogers had to get parental consent. He was only 16 when he signed up for the Marine Corps. Eventually, his friends would move on, but for Rogers, it became a 29-year commitment beginning with World War II.
After boot camp, then I was stationed at Quantico, Virginia, which is outside of Washington. That's where I trained as an aircraft mechanic, and I became a crew chief on one of the transport aircraft.
During the tail end of World War II, Rogers served domestically, flying troops and supplies around the United States. It was his next assignment which would take him abroad.
I went to Korea in 1950, which is right at the beginning of the Korean War. Of course, during that period, nobody knew where Korea was, or on the map, or anything else.
Rogers' responsibilities were the same in Korea, flying supplies and troops to different areas. He would also bring back the wounded, or KIAs, those killed in action.
Korea was just a desolate area that was just cold. That's the only thing it was. And that was one of the biggest casualties, was frostbite and trying to work in the cold. And to this day, my fingertips are still numb whenever it gets cold. I just have no feeling in the tips of my fingers from the cold weather that was there. It was just dusty and dirty, and in the wintertime you had snow that was knee-deep. Troops on the ground, they had a very difficult time with the cold. They had what they called the Mickey Mouse boot, which was a insulated boot that you wore, plus parkas, and try to stay as warm as you could.
In the evenings, Rogers' plane would drop flares.
We'd be dropping flares for the night fighters. Go ahead and destroy the movement of the troops on the ground. They were dropped out of the air. They had a lanyard which went ahead and ignited the flare. They were 1,500 candle power, which would light up the area pretty good. We would get the word from up front they needed 3 flares at 30-second intervals, and so we would drop the flares at that particular interval if they wanted them.
It was hard to count how many times Rogers' plane was shot at.
They were pretty close, they were pretty loud, so you know they were pretty close. We were shot at from the ground up. Of course, that's where I got my commendation medal for dropping the flares at night for the night fighters.
Rogers received 6 air medals.
Do your job and do what you had to do, and just do it the best of your ability.
When it came to defending themselves, Rogers says they didn't have much protection during the Korean War.
The only arm we had was a .45 pistol that we carried with us in the airplane. And we had, of course, a submachine gun in the back of the airplane if ever we went down.
Most striking, there were no ear protectors at that time.
That's the reason I think that most of my hearing is bad, is because of the jet engines and the reciprocating engines that we worked on without wearing protectors.
Through the changes and challenges, Rogers didn't forget his family and friends back home.
I can remember during the Depression when I was growing up how my father struggled in order to go ahead and provide for the family. And when I was over in Korea, I would keep only a small portion of my paycheck and send all the rest of it back home.
At the end of the war, Rogers made it back home with one minor injury to his knee.
I was on the wing of the airplane, and I slipped off the wing and went down to the ground.
Years later, he went to Vietnam.
Vietnam was more intense than Korea was. We actually had 2 airplanes that we lost in Vietnam. In Korea, we didn't lose any airplanes. We've seen more casualties in Vietnam than we did actually see in Korea.
But this time, Rogers and the other Marines had more protection.
In Vietnam, they had the armored vest. And even in the airplanes, they started armor plating underneath the helicopters and the back seats for the pilots. Whereas in Korea, we never had that.
Finally, after serving in 3 wars, Rogers retired in 1974.
I had left my family enough, and I wanted to just go ahead and stay with my family.
Today, Rogers works with veterans associations, making sure not one veteran is left behind when it comes to getting the benefits they deserve. Still ahead, a Garden Grove man became a local hero after serving in Iraq. What split-second decision saved lives and earned him the highest military distinction. Roy Gleason was known for playing professional ball with the Dodgers. That was before he got drafted into the U.S. Army and sent to Vietnam, where he fought hard until he was almost taken out of the game.
It happened so fast that I had to blink twice. You know, I couldn't believe it was happening.
At 24, Roy Gleason was drafted by the military. He was playing professional ball for the Dodgers, but in 1967, he was forced to go abroad and leave his first passion, baseball, behind.
They literally picked me up and threw me on the plane and shipped me over to Vietnam.
Much of it was a blur, but Gleason vividly remembers the plane ride to Vietnam.
I knew I was going to be in the thick of it, and so did everybody else on that plane, and we didn't talk much. My gosh, you look over to the side of the plane and you saw almost like a maroon landscape with vegetation around it. So if you're thinking, this is no good, you know, I'm going to be in this.
Once they landed, one of the biggest challenges, acclimating to the heat.
You got off that plane, you were immediately hit with a distinct smell and humidity and just unbelievable heat. It just was like a furnace blasting at you. You forget the sights, the smells, the sounds, stuff like that. They make an immediate impression on you and they never leave you.
Gleason's journey began in December 1967 and would last 8 months and 4 days, not that he was counting.
We went where intelligence said the enemy was. They wanted us to make contact, and our job was search and destroy. And usually we were the ones that got shot at first. You were scared to death, you know, the whole time you're there. I don't think there was a day that went by that I can recall, other than when I was at base camp, that somebody didn't shoot at us. You know, there was always either a sniper fire or a full-blown ambush. It was jungle warfare. They hit you and run, hit you and run. You hardly ever saw them, but you saw the muzzle flash. I think somebody once stated that being in combat is hours and hours of boredom with minutes of sheer terror. And That's basically about what it is.
As time went on, Gleason got better at spotting ambushes.
I went over there as a private, and I made sergeant because I had survived. I had made my own vest, because when I was walking point, I carried an M79 with 20 canisters, 40 HEs, 4 grenades, 2 canteens. I could go on. You go loaded.
Through the different battles, Gleason's dedication earned him recognition.
I'd been awarded the Soldier of the Month of the whole division, which was quite a prestigious award. I was more thankful and happy to have because it got me a week out of the bush. I got good food and security for a week. That was a great reward to me back then.
Gleason spent many moments in Nam remembering his family.
All you think about is back home in the world. We called it the Freedom Bird.
I've got contact with some snipers, over.
The 8-month adrenaline rush ended when Gleason got hit on July 24th, 1968.
I was blown about 10, 15 feet in the air into a moat, which probably saved me because then the small arms fire opened up. There was an ambush. I got hit in the arm, the leg, through the wrist, through the calf, through the elbow, and everything was on my left side. And I was very fortunate.
He received the Purple Heart after he was wounded.
Reflecting back, it was just things that you don't want to remember, but you have to deal with them because you're not going to forget.
Gleason stayed in various hospitals for about 5 months until he was released on January 10, 1969.
The highlight was coming home. I was still alive.
Today, Gleason advocates honoring all Vietnam veterans who honorably served their nation.
There was no hugs, no kisses, but just a lot of jeers. Some of us were spit on. There was no welcome home, and we were looked down upon. It was really hurtful. Some guys re-upped and they went back to Vietnam because they figured they didn't have a home anymore. We were treated terribly, and I think it's long overdue that they finally say welcome home to Vietnam veterans.
Gleason never fully made it back to professional baseball after he returned from the war, but he has found another passion, recalling the lifetime memories and experiences of Vietnam.
I've been to the traveling wall, which was here in Garden Grove, to see their names on the wall, to know them like we did. And you reflect back and you know how easily that could be my name up there too. I still find it hard to believe a lot of times that my name's not up there, but I'm very thankful that it isn't.
Veterans will tell you the bond of brotherhood runs deep, so much so that when Navy SEAL Michael Mansour got the chance to save the lives of his teammates in Iraq, he didn't hesitate to jump on top of a live grenade. To those who knew him, it wasn't a surprise that Michael Anthony Mansour would grow up to be a hero. Mansour was a Garden Grove High School graduate. Although he suffered from asthma, he would swim and play football to strengthen his lungs. And even in those teen years, his classmates knew there was something above average about him.
Heart, passion, strength, and just desire to be there. Great teammate, good player. Always did what he was told, and one of those guys that persevered by hard work.
Hard work, that's what Mansour was known for. At the age of 20, he enlisted in the United States Navy. Only 1/3 of those who try to become Navy SEALs make it, and in September 2004, Mansour earned that privilege. His sister Sarah describes him as courageous and devoted.
He was a very committed individual, and he was somebody that you could really rely on. If he said he was going to do something, he was going to do it.
While he was deployed to Ramadi, Iraq, Petty Officer Mansour conducted special operations. He would run into the line of fire and save wounded teammates. He was a leader in combat and in life. But on September 29, 2006, he made the split-second decision that would put him in the rank of heroes. Mansour and two of his teammates took position on a rooftop. That's when an insurgent's grenade bounced off of Mansour's chest and fell in front of him. He didn't think twice, leapt on top of the grenade before it exploded, and died 30 minutes later.
Instantly, and without regard for his own safety, he threw himself onto the grenade to absorb the force of the explosion with his body, saving the lives of his two teammates.
Mr. and Mrs. Mansour, America owes you a debt that can never be repaid. This nation will always cherish the memory of your son. We will not let his life go in vain.
Mansour's sacrifice didn't go unrecognized. The Medal of Honor is the highest military distinction, and Mansour became the 4th recipient in the War on Terror. He previously had earned the Silver Star for pulling a Navy SEAL to safety during a firefight, and he received the Purple Heart.
Just come out of Garden Grove and he represent, his city, his country. It's just disappointing. Passed away at 25 years old.
In my book, Mike's a true hero. He did exactly what he wanted to do. He knew before he ever graduated from high school that he was going to go in the service.
We gather today in the presence of true sacrifice at a level that is unmatched.
Locally, monuments went up to honor Mansour. This Freedom Memorial is now a permanent fixture at his alma mater.
When we see Mike being honored, we're very grateful for what's being done for him. That's all we can ask for. It's just for remembrance of Mike and who he was.
A hero who won't be forgotten. There are many ways we can honor our veterans. We'll show you one effort underway in Garden Grove after the break. It's never too late to pay tribute to the men and women who sacrificed for our country. That's why the Vietnam War Museum of America Foundation is teaming up with the community to thank our veterans in a very special way.
Mike Foster grew up in Garden Grove, California.
I've got contact with the snipers, over.
He enlisted in the Marines when he was 17 and served in America's longest and costliest conflict, the Vietnam War. On March 24, 1969, during his second tour in Vietnam, Mike and several other Marines were killed in an ambush.
He died fighting for and fighting with who he wanted to be with. It was his choice. You can't take that away from the soldier. A soldier knows that he's in imminent danger, and he knows he's fighting for his buddies, he's fighting for the Corps, he's fighting for his beliefs, he's fighting for himself.
Mike was 2 months short of coming home. Today, his name is honored with more than 58,000 others at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C.
He's my personal hero in my life. As all the soldiers who fought there and died or fought there and survived.
The battle to survive was just beginning. Those who made it back home found home had changed. Demonstrations against the war covered college campuses.
During the war, everybody wanted to come home. Once we got home, it was like, I'd have been better off with a bullet through the head, quick, done, and wouldn't have to deal with all this.
Veterans were haunted by survivor's guilt, long-lasting post-traumatic stress disorder, and a sense of shame.
You were spit at, you were accused of this, and you were accused of that. But you're just doing your job when you're over there.
My grandfather was in World War I, and the American public was very supportive. My father was in World War II. The public was very supportive. Korea, the American people were very supportive. Vietnam, for whatever reason, they weren't. The biggest impact on their mind that somebody threw urine on them or spit at them, called them baby killers.
Following the adage, better late than never, the Vietnam War Museum of America Foundation is asking for your help to thank and glorify our veterans. The nonprofit is trying to build a museum, archiving the experiences of both American veterans and South Vietnamese soldiers in order to preserve their stories for future generations.
3 months into my extension, while attacking an enemy position, my gunship plowed into a rice paddy, rolled over, disintegrated, and I was medevaced out of Vietnam, a 20-year-old casualty of the war.
The foundation has already secured a building to make the museum a reality.
Its location is flawless. It's on Harbor Boulevard, directly south of Disneyland. The museum will have on its roof a helicopter with its blade turning. The helicopter will represent and will show the people fleeing Saigon on that April day when Saigon fell. We wish to have a representation of the gate at the Citadel of Hue, built as the pedestrian entrance to the museum. The Vietnam War was characterized by daily news on every channel in the United States. And our museum is going to be filled with TV screens of all different sizes, showing some of those news clippings.
The museum is expected to have changing exhibits showcasing the events that led to the war, the challenges of guerrilla warfare, and the changes that happened on the home front.
And those changes have put a stamp on America that we need to document, because there are people who simply don't understand what happened during the Vietnam era.
Turning this vision for the museum into reality now depends on donations from people like you. The goal is to raise $17 million to develop both the museum and the exhibits within the facility.
I think if you look at history, we as a nation have a lot to make up for the way those veterans were treated. This is one way to do a little, not nearly what the men deserved, but it's certainly on its way to helping make some amends and tell them they were valued.
We're hoping that this museum will be a place of forgiveness, a place of healing.
A place of healing for families like Mike Foster's. The museum will be a place to gain a better understanding of a misunderstood time in history. It will honor those who gave their lives in the war, share their stories, and pass along history lessons for generations to come.
I have sampan crossing up ahead. I will attempt to intercept. Come on, first, come on, let's go. All in behind.
To learn more about the Vietnam War Museum of America, you can visit www.vnwma.com. Thanks for joining us on this special program honoring our veterans. From all of us here at Garden Grove TV3, we want to say thank you to those who have served or are currently serving our nation, and of course, their families and loved ones too. Thank you.